Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mayor Nystrom here in the city of Norwich, and this is my 8th year serving as mayor in the city. Previously served 18 years in the State House of Representatives. Actually, I worked very closely with the Connecticut Realtors Association those entire 18 years. People like Mr. Bean, Annette D'Antuono, and I go on and on, but Annette in many ways was a mentor for me when it came to housing issues, matters, things like that. Public service for me has been a way of life. I ran for the first alderman seat when I was right out of college. I was 22 years old back in '79. And except for 7 years, I've held public office right up until now, 2021, representing the city of Norwich, either locally or at the state level. And I like to be engaged in hopefully things that are positive and that make the place a better place to live, raise families, all of that above. That's basically who I am.
Great. Les, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, just quickly. Not a lot to talk about. I'm sort of filling in for Angela Adams this morning. She had another conflict with this, so she asked if I said absolutely whatever I can add to it. I live in Norwich. I'm retired Navy. I've got a small real estate investment company that I've had since 1984 in the local region. The Chamber of Commerce I've been involved with for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. I'm the chairman of the Economic Development Committee. I think that's the biggest reason I'm here this morning, is to talk about economic development and what we're seeing within the businesses. I do a few things around Norwich, and yeah, I'm on the planning commission, on the block grant funding committee. I'm the chairman of that, and I do quite a bit of stuff, as much as I can around Norwich. So I'm pretty involved in the community, and the Property Owners Association, the local Property Owners Association. 20 years ago, I was the vice president and the legislative chair for the Connecticut Property Owners Association, which is now a defunct organization. But at that time, we had 13 property owner chapters around the state, to both include residential and commercial.
Les, is that the same? Is that like the Norwich chapter of the Connecticut Property Homeowners Alliance? Is that different or the same?
Well, I'm in what we call the Norwich Property Owners Association. That we started up back in the late 1997, 1998. I'm the vice president of that one. And we were at that point part of the Connecticut Property Owners Association. And we did a lot of legislative stuff back then. We did change the eviction laws. We did quite a few things back in 1998 till about 2000. The tendency we find for property owners associations, and you'll find several of them around the state right now, and they all have a little bit different name. And a lot of those roots of those organizations go back to the Connecticut Property Owners Association. We have a tendency as property owners to, we all sort of run our own kingdom, so to speak. So you get a bunch of property owners in the room and they can't agree on anything because they're all so used to making all their final decisions. So they, historically, all those types of organizations fragment after a few years into because they all have different issues and different principles that they need to work on, depending on what type of residential properties they have, and if it's corporate or if it's mom and pop, and they all have different issues. So,
okay.
In answer to the question, I guess it's, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you and welcome to both of you for coming on to speak to the commercial real estate practitioners today. Let's go ahead and talk about business and economic development as it relates to COVID and reopening, or anything you guys want to talk about in terms of business. And then we will move into the state hospital and finish with whatever Norwich is doing to stop Asian hate. Mayor Pete, do you want to go ahead and start with what's going on business-wise? You're on mute.
Mute. Okay, thank you. The city is always engaged in business retention. I pay attention to anyone who's already here. I think that's rule number one. I've always had that attitude. and I find that it works best. You have to stay in touch with businesses in order to make that effective. You can't wait till there's a crisis. We meet with businesses periodically. We bring department heads with us to find out if there are any issues affecting them. Through those meetings and yearly activities, we find out about opportunities for growth. Nordson's a prime example of that. We were meeting with them about every 6 months, going back almost 3 years now. And we found out they were looking for a large expansion, but it could happen in Connecticut or 2 other states. So we upped our game, met with them much more frequently. We brought as many resources as we could. And through that process, we convinced them to expand here. And if you go by their plant today, you will see a very large steel structure going up. I haven't been out there in a couple of weeks, but they're expanding their physical presence here in Connecticut, in Norwich itself, greatly. Not just a larger building with higher ceilings, which allow them more activities, more opportunities to move their injection mold devices around. But they're adding jobs here as well. And that was partly because of our ability to bring them the information they needed. And we utilized EWIB, Eastern Workforce Investment Board. I've been serving on the board there now. There's 5 elected officials who deal with their budgets and stuff like that. I'm going into my 2nd year of service there. But one, they already wanted to stay in Norwich. They liked the clientele, the people they hired. They were very happy with that. They were happy with the location, but we had to convince them that we would have the new employee, that base, to be there to expand the jobs here. That was really critical to them. That was the deciding factor. And that's one of the biggest issues facing companies now with COVID. A lot of people don't want to go back to work for whatever reason,
Sure.
Whether their own health, they still have concerns or fear in some cases of this COVID virus and its impact. Some have gotten soft, if that's a way to describe it without offending anyone. They look at the amount of money they're being paid to stay home. And you know, I was at a press conference on Monday. We do a food distribution on the Massachusetts parking lot, 28 Stonington Road. And I remember saying to someone, one of the TV people that were there, because Blumenthal was there, Courtney, and our Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bicewicz, that people need to go back to work. You know, that's the real sense of normalcy that we're looking for, that everybody's working the way it was before this pandemic hit. And I think that's really important that other people in any leadership post emphasize that. Find the value of being at work again, however you do it, but get back to work. I mean, the state's going to change that system. You're going to have to now report that you've sought at least 3 job opportunities every week. They're going back to that other basis. How they verify, I'm not sure. But there's a lot of value in working hard, in being part of something better than just yourself. We're working on a business park creation, if you will. The former Byron Brook, which was supposed to be a world-class golf course with big homes on it. That went away when the golf market fell apart. We have been working on this for almost 3 years. What I have seen in my 8 years as mayor is that we don't have clean, available land for development. We have a lot of industrial sites that formerly housed business and industry, but they come with a higher price tag. In many cases, the cost is just so excessive on cleaning up that the businesses won't even look at those sites, even though they may be strategically located. Just think of the Cape Heart Mill down in Greenville. That actually had some value until 8 young arsonists decided to burn it down years ago. And they were all caught. They all paid their dues, if you will. But without the historic tax credit value, a large building like that, these big mills that our city has many of, you can't access historic tax credits, federal and state, even though the feds have diminished the value by spreading out the ability to take that over 5 years instead of right up front. None of these sites are going to be realized as new opportunities. So we pay attention to who's here. We work with groups that come to the city and ask about how we will treat them. I'll end this part of my comments by letting you know when we meet with a new business, I show up at hopefully the site they're looking to acquire. I bring every department head with me, or their person that works with them. We try to answer every single question a developer would have right up front, the very first meeting. They don't have to go search for an office like in New York, and we make it as quick as possible getting information out. And then when our department members leave, they have homework to do, and they know that they've met the person. The other aspect of that is on Thursdays at 9:30, these same departments get together and we look at any proposal that's stuck, that has slowed down, that has stopped, and we all try to figure out how to keep it moving. That's the way we run in Norwich, and I think it's a good model for others. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will attest to what you're saying, because we were looking at a building before the pandemic in Norwich on Otrobando Road, and we had Bob Mills working with us and brought in the fire marshal and I forget who from the planning to make sure that, you know, what our potential expenses would be to make sure that the building would accommodate our needs. So that definitely happened. And I will also agree with you on the jobs market. I have an ad out that has had one application and no follow-up when I left a message for that person. And I'm in the Norwich Rotary, and landscaping and restaurateurs, they also cannot find help. So I'm definitely with you on wanting to get people back to work. Les, did you want to chime in on what your knowledge of what's going on?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit to it, sort of paint a picture. This is basically out of the Economic Development Committee at the Greater Norwich Area Chamber of Commerce. We continuously talk to different businesses and see what's going on. We sort of try to measure what's going on by metrics. That's very difficult to do. So almost everything that we look at right now is anecdotal. As you know, before the pandemic, the businesses were doing very well back then. Once the pandemic hit, the businesses were basically told to close. They continued to pay their employees by getting different money from the Payment Protection Program, and there were grants and loans, and money was very available over the past year. Initially, it was going to be a temporary closure. It turned into a year of being closed down. Now that the restrictions have lifted, business owners are just now beginning to, really the accumulated debt that they've gotten over the past year, and how do they reopen? And most of them say the biggest obstacle to reopening is the debt, but at the same time, it is also not being able to get people to come back to work. Restaurants, if they open to full capacity, they don't have the right staffing. People come into the restaurant, it's a bad experience, they won't come back. So restaurants have to be very, very careful how they balance that reopening and ratchet up their capacity based upon employees. Manufacturing, some of the airline and aircraft type parts around this region, some of those small manufacturers, they were closed down because the airline shut down for a year. Now that they're reopening, they cannot get employees back. And those are higher skill sets, and those people are hard to find at this point. They may have been paid by the Payment Protection Program at the very beginning of the year, or when we shut down. And now they're not really out there, but yet the debt is still owned by the owners of the businesses. So that's something we really have to take a look at, and some of it is forgivable. The supply lines, if you go into manufacturing, which we had a really big push on manufacturing. The supply lines for manufacturing right now, I guess you could say, are somewhat corrupt or not effective. Many of the items that people need in manufacturing just don't exist. We all know about the microchip issue with vehicles. I was just on a phone call with Taiwan 2 nights ago. Taiwan is basically shutting down. The whole country's going into lockdown. They don't have a plan to test. They don't have a plan to vaccinate, and they're one of the biggest chip makers in the world right now. So it's going to turn into a fairly significant long-term lack of microchips, and we need a lot of microchips. Foam manufacturing doesn't exist at this point. you know, and that includes furniture, that includes mattresses, that includes car seats, anything with foam. So the supply lines are really hurting right now. And the fix, anecdotally, is anywhere from 6 months to a year to even get back to a stable platform on that. Once they do get manufacturing back, the shipping costs have tripled. So everything is going to go up. Obviously, inflation is going to have a significant increase. That's going to have a big impact on everybody. I've had a conversation with the vice president of Mohegan Sun twice in the last couple of weeks. The job fairs they're having, there are some people relocating here because of those job fairs, but they're having trouble finding housing. Some of those they can't show the income that they need to do the background checks. Some of them that are coming into the restaurants, they get a $2,000 signing bonus, but they don't show enough income to meet background checks because a lot of that is in tips. So there is definitely a barrier to getting into housing of people that are being hired right now at the casino. So there's some significant barriers to getting back to normal.
I don't know, that sounds like an opportunity for lenders who have looser restrictions, perhaps.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, on the Economic Development Committee, the bankers that are part of the committee, you know, it's really interesting because several of them, including credit unions, have said that their deposits are higher than they've ever been. But for those folks that stayed working over the past year, they couldn't spend their money anywhere. So they would put it in the banks. The banks have money. They have money. And it's the deposits are there, and those that kept working have a significant amount of money, but there is no place to spend it. Retail shut down. Everybody's used to spending, going online to buy all their products. That hurts us locally because the businesses here don't have the money to pay their mortgages or their rent. They don't have the money to pay their utilities and their insurance, and you know, it just it's a very difficult situation. So we're just on the very brink of the recovery, the economic recovery from this thing.
So when you say very brink of recovery, are you considering commercial spaces that might be on the brink of more problems or more fallout or more vacancies or closures? No, you think we're on the brink of recovery when it comes to commercial?
You know, I don't know. That's a good question. That's hard to say because I think, you know, talking to some of the businesses, they can reopen without restrictions, and they think they're going to get the same balance sheet that they had before the pandemic.
Right.
And that balance sheet is not going to exist for a long time, you know, because they can't get their product in because of supply lines. They can't get the people to work. They still have the crushing debt that's accumulated over the past year, plus the debt they had before the pandemic. So anecdotally, I think over the next few months is going to be the story's going to be told there on how they see themselves balancing that business once they, you know, they really get their foot back in the door.
I think you might be right there. Our chief economic economist, Dr. Lawrence Yoon with the National Association of Realtors is forecasting shorter leases will be the thing coming in for the comfort level, for the security level, for the not being sure what the future is. More than half of NAR commercial members reported more companies are leasing smaller offices and 2-year terms or less, but that's across the country. So I'm not speaking for Norwich. I don't know if you or Pete have anything to add to that in terms of commercial business.
The only thing I would like to add at this time, and I don't know if it's addressing your question directly, during the pandemic, we as a city received HUD funding to assist businesses with dealing with some of that accumulating debt, whether it was utility payments, rent, you name it. The same thing is true also for people in their apartments and such. The city received $506,000, and through Leanne Gomes' office, our human services director, those funds were administered to assist people. There was obviously an application process and stuff like that. There are still pending applications. There's another $544,000 from HUD that was coming in for this same purpose. We finally got a ruling that allowed us to make payments directly to our own municipal utility. In the beginning, they weren't going to allow that because it was municipally owned, but we showed and convinced them that there was separate autonomy with them, that they're totally set up separate from the city government itself. And so that was allowed to go forward. That $544,000 has not been received yet. So there's a waiting list of people who've applied for that continued help, but it hasn't come forward. The thing I want to add to that is John Solomon and I, our city manager, we met at length yesterday. We're going over this American Rescue Plan funding. Sorry, I had to fence with a phone call. We intend on putting either $500,000 to $750,000 aside for that same type of assistance for families and small businesses here in the city. And I can tell you that even though Leanne is retiring from her job as the human service director, she's staying on to administer that. That's her retirement. And we're blessed that she's willing to do that because a wonderful person, great employee. So the city is looking forward towards ways of continuing to help the small businesses here in this community. I just wanted to share that because it speaks to the debt that people have had to deal with. And it goes beyond holding your employees in and taking the CARES funding to keep that employee position open. There are many other issues that create debt that when we're trying to address those specific ones, rent, utilities, things like that, we're going to continue down that path.
Yeah, that's great. And I understand that fiscally, the state is in pretty good shape. The Connecticut realtors are fighting hard not to allow that conveyance tax to go through. That would allow the municipality to decide whether to add that additional tax on property. Are you aware of that? And do you have any thoughts about that one way or another?
I'll be honest, we sometimes ask for other means of revenue here within the city. I think of a hotel tax, that type of thing, whether or not any of that could have been shared with the cities. It never happened. That sounds more like you're setting up competition border to border. And I don't know that that's a healthy thing to do for a state as small as we are. If we were Texas, where you still have county government, and it's a whole different dynamic down there, or California, but we're not that large a state. I think that would be a negative impact on business here in the city and the state itself. A lot of things they propose do not go forward. I was there for 18 years watching that dynamic. You know, unfortunately, though, if someone really believes in it, if they still keep getting reelected, maybe 6 years down the road, it shows up again in a different form, a backdoor. So you have to be vigilant. And that's what I remember the realtors were. They were very vigilant. They were always.
We are hoping that that does get struck down. And we are on the same page with you that it would create a poor competitive situation, especially for towns like Norwich, which already has a pretty high tax base. Let's talk about the state hospital. What's any update on that?
The funds for cleanup from the state side, that which is going to be provided, have been allocated. My understanding is the next stopping point is the state's demanding that the town of Preston contribute $2 million now to help complete the cleanup. Again, they're a different community, small town, everything is town referendum. That's what has that project stalled now. It was our hope, and I know it was our Senator Kathy Austin's hope, that last $7 million that was finally released by the bond commission. I mean, one of the things that happened in COVID was there were no bond commission meetings. So if you had an item waiting, it just sat there. They actually voted to release the funds, but now I believe it's DECD is demanding Preston come up with $2 million of their own. And I don't know where that sits. I haven't talked to the first select woman there. about this issue. I stay in touch with Kathy all the time. The plans they have changed, I can say that much. What was originally that 30,000 foot view that everyone saw with outdoor sporting athletic facilities and indoor water park and all that kind of stuff. I can't speak to whether the water park is still on the drawing board, but other concepts have morphed into something else. They have a prime developer who I would imagine is losing patience at this point in time. And that would be a shame. But I really can't disclose what I've been told because it's not public. But it would be a generational change for this whole area. And I think not just the state, but New England, it all comes to pass. And it benefits the city. The city's municipal utilities is the provider of service there, water, sewer. It's part of our gas franchise, which is protected by state statute, that in town of Preston. Electric might have to be a bid process, but we're already much lower than Eversource or anyone else, unless someone's willing to bid at a loss. And I don't think today they could afford to do that. So we have an opportunity here as the city of Norwich to directly gain from that development. And it's in our best interest to do whatever we can to assist them. And that's been my outlook. That's been my focus.
So I know you can't give us information about exactly what the change is, but am I hearing you correctly? Is it a shift away from homes and entertainment and mixed use development to one that's more utility driven that would positively impact the region, or am I wrong about that?
No, it's not a shift away from the items you talked about. I just don't know the makeup of things. But in any case, any utility sale is what I'm describing would be through the Norwich Public Utilities. That's the emphasis that I was really focusing on. The individual, whether there's housing or not, I didn't believe there was a lot of housing proposed on that in the first place. I do know that their transportation needs extend beyond the campus of the Norwich Hospital property, and that they will be looking for some assistance from this city of Norwich to address those issues in whatever form it takes. They told me that over 2 years ago. That was they hired a transportation consortium out of Boston to analyze the region and how transportation could flow best to the site. I think the best thing the most important thing that they acknowledge out of that is you don't want to build parking garages all over that site. That takes away from the development opportunity. And I'm not saying or recommending parking garages in Norwich either. We don't know what form that's going to take. They just know that they can't do what they want to do all on the site itself. It takes away from expanding development, and development is what's the goal.
Okay, so before we move on, one last question on that. So with the stall of the $2 million agreement by the town of Preston to start that cleanup, am I right that you're saying that no cleanup has started yet? Oh
no, the majority of the cleanup has already been complete. This $7 million from the state was to complete it. They've spent millions of dollars down there cleaning up.
Okay, so as soon as they get that additional $2 million, they'll finish the cleanup and then they'll begin work on developing that.
Well, that's my understanding, but I'm not the source to actually verify that. Okay. They want Preston to contribute $2 million to match the 7 from the state, and they're discussing that very quietly. And I'm not looking to blow the beans on Preston or anybody here. I just tried to answer the question, but if the state's looking for a rebound, they really should get out of the way, get that cleanup done, because that then benefits. That's when jobs can be located there once whatever structures are realized and businesses and systems are in place. That's recovery.
Okay, thank you. If anyone has any questions along the way, just unmute yourself and chime in. Otherwise, if there aren't any questions additional on the state hospital, quick question on the marina. Do you know anything happening with the marina?
The marina lease itself is up for sale. There have been a number of potential new operators, but the parties remain apart based on the numbers. That's the best way to say it.
Okay, and that restaurant is it open? It's not open at this time, right?
It is not.
Right.
No.
Okay. Les, I don't know if you have anything to add to the topic of the state hospital. If not, then I think it was you that talked about what Norwich might be doing to stop Asian hate. It wasn't a topic that I brought up, but I believe you did. Did you want to make comment on that?
I can. Are you asking Les?
No, I'm asking you, Pete.
Oh, okay. That's an important issue. Last night I attended Asian Pacific American program at NFA. They had guest speakers come in, including the Attorney General, William Tong. They had one of the appellate court judges was there, along with an attorney from the Hartford area. And then there were 3 local people, Suki Lagrito, who runs our Global City program. Over the years, we have been developing that program in partnership with the Chelsea Groton Bank. They've been extremely generous to the city. They provided a 3-year commitment of $100,000. The city matched some of that funding, and we had a number of festivals that were growing where we encouraged the learning and the immersion of other cultures to step out of just being a member in our community and, you know, working here, raising your family, but actually let us learn more about them through festivals. Of course, that was shut down by COVID as well. It hasn't operated under those terms, and it has now shifted away towards development of storefront businesses. We have a program known as the Vanilla Box program. That program actually locates people who own properties in downtown. And that's where our focus is right now as we develop this as a model. And they partner with that owner of the property, and we actually provide some funds through that program to help make the business ready, the site ready for moving a business in, getting it ready. So when someone comes in to look at a business in downtown Norwich, they're not seeing an old storefront that's just the way it's been sitting since it's been empty for 10, 20 years or however long. They're actually seeing a new site that's ready to be utilized. So we're working on that. But getting to the violence, what we need to do is speak out against it, acknowledge that it happens, look at the root causes of it, and try to nip it in the bud. It goes back to the violence that we experienced across the country when Mr. Floyd was killed. We had a number of protests. I participated in every single one of them as the mayor, and I continue to meet with community leaders. Some of the community leaders who helped organize those protests are now part of a group of people, Rose City United, and they meet every week. We do monthly public meetings with our community police officers, and our community police model, I think, is one of the best in the state. We engage people who have concerns. We don't run from them. We don't ignore them. We try to stay ahead of the curve of any kind of activity that you're talking about. And I think it's very important that the people in our community who are fearful for themselves understand that we're ready here to assist them. But we actually want to know of problems in neighborhoods before they begin, before they escalate, and then we will address them. We will go into those neighborhoods and talk to people and bring parties together if we have to. Mediation is one form that can take. On the flip side, if something happens that's illegal, you will be prosecuted. There'll be no walking away from that. We saw that in other ends of the country through all that other violence. Make no mistake about it. You break the law, you harm someone, you will be prosecuted. You will be, if necessary, locked up, because we're not going to tolerate violence to any of our citizens. We're just not going to accept it. We won't allow it to happen. If we can prevent it ahead of time, that's our best foot forward. Get ahead of the issue itself and address it before it escalates. And our police have de-escalation training. I want to emphasize that. They've had de-escalation training for at least 4 years in the city of Norwich. When Pat Daly became the chief of police, that was one of the first things he instituted. He sent 4 officers out of state for training. They came back and they have annual reviews of de-escalation tactics. Our police are on the streets. They're not just running around in cruisers. They're on bikes, particularly now the warmer weather. They're part of the community. They attend neighborhood watch groups. We learn about issues that way as well. Again, getting into the neighborhood and talking to the people that actually live there, who are actively seeking for ways to improve the safety of their own neighborhoods. We really want to stay ahead of all of these issues and not see that they develop.
Have you seen any increase within the police department where any officers have been reprimanded or had to be let go for
No.
behavior that was unacceptable?
No.
Okay.
No, in fact, it's the opposite. After the police accountability passed, we had 2 officers leave, and they were young officers. They were great officers. There were 9 others considering resigning at that point because there are aspects of that bill, and I talked about one of them. That bill required de-escalation training. We've been doing that for years down here already. And that's one of the things I objected to the overall tenor of that bill. It was that they were painting a broad brush that every police is a bad person. And we know that's not true. So that's why I spoke out against its passage at that time. I acknowledge the good aspects of the bill, but there are things in there that were punitive that's certainly not warranted down here in the city of Norwich. We've got a great police force, and they do everything they can to help people stand by them, stand by our citizens. You know, and until someone can show me otherwise, I know that's in my heart, that's what's true. Doesn't mean there can't be improvement. I mean, that's why when Pat became chief, he ordered de-escalation training before someone said you had to do it. You know, everyone on our force have cameras. They were fully camered last year when the horrible death of George Floyd occurred back then. We're ahead of the curve on improving police services and community relations, way ahead of the curve. I just thought that was such a heavy hand coming down. You know, show me the issues that you asked for here. They don't exist.
Okay. I don't mean to put you on the spot because I didn't ask for this in advance, but do you have a general idea of the racial and ethnic makeup of Norwich? I understand it is a very diverse area. Do you have any idea what the percentage is?
I'm going to guess it's about 60-40. I'm rounding numbers up and down. We have a very diverse population. We have thousands of people here from Peru alone. I learned that when we held our first festival for Peru citizens here, which is now over 3 years ago. Someone from the council came up, and like everything else, it was on his phone. He could tell me how many citizens from Peru lived in our city. And he hit a button and he showed it. And it was over 4,000 from Peru alone, just in our community. We have a large Asian population. We have a strong Cape Verdean population here in our city, and they've been here for over a century. The backbone of our community. Leanne Gomes will tell you how proud she is of her Cape Verdean ancestry and things like that. I mean, these are our citizens. These are our people. That's who we look like. I can tell you they're having a difficult time filling vacancies at the police department. Number one, people are afraid to become a policeman today, a police officer or a policewoman. And I will tell you the standards in Norwich are higher than other communities. People that have applied to be a policeman in Norwich who didn't pass have gone to other communities in Southeast Connecticut and have been hired by those other police departments. Now, that's not to dismiss the value of departments, but they're extremely high, very high.
Has the crime increased during or after, with COVID?
Well, we've seen some higher violence. Shootings right down the street here on Laurel Hill. There was someone who was killed. I guess the term is execution style. And then been other shootings. There were shootings at an empty house just on North Cliff Street within the last week. The casings of the bullets were found in the street. The bullets are in the house. No one was living there. I don't know the circumstances of that. Violent crime has seen an uptick. Yes, people are frustrated. When you're trapped inside the same 4 walls with the same person, it can change who you are. I hope it doesn't. but that's just human nature. We're not meant to be in buildings all the time. Some people say we're not meant to live in the city in tens of thousands either. And that's why you have higher crime there. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. There's clearly higher competition there for people's needs. And space is a huge commodity that people value. If you live in a larger city, Boston, New York, the rents there alone, people talked about rents here earlier, I think, amazingly high down there. My daughter has a friend, I think their apartment was 700 square feet. They were paying $2,600 a month in the Boston suburbs. They weren't even in Boston. They since bought a home, so they're out of that mess. But what people value is what they seek.
Yeah, and even 400 square foot spaces are becoming a consideration for building. But back to, thank you for that. And anyone feel free to jump in on crime and racial and ethnic disparity. Let's talk about NCDC and any developments there. Has anyone been hired to replace our beloved Jason Vincent?
Thank you for that comment. Jim Bolano from Wyndham, he has been hired. That vote took place last week. He won't be starting till, I believe, July 6th, day after Independence Day, which is celebrated on the 5th. He'll be in Norwich at least 2 or 3 different days for some acclimation opportunities, meet with staff, meet with myself, city manager, and others, just to adjust him. He's not a stranger to the region by any shape of imagination. He's been up there for the last 6 years. He also had previous experience in the Danbury region and economic development. He's actually an attorney, initially by profession, but that's who the board selected. That was the final choice.
Okay, well, we'll have to invite him back to talk to our commercial realtors just to give us an update on any plans or any visions going forward. As I said, commercial looks like smaller spaces, shorter leases. ECAR is looking for a permanent home. We were getting ready to, excuse me. We were getting ready to buy a place in Norwich and still would be, but I haven't seen that big change, but the eviction moratorium hasn't ended yet. So still unknown there. Okay, so
What are your square foot needs?
Probably about 3,500 square feet. Our biggest specificity is we need a lot of parking. We need like 50 parking spaces.
Okay.
So keep that in mind, and we're all please. Thank you.
Before you leave the NCDC, could Mayor Nystrom, can you give any update on what kind of grants you're having for development downtown?
So that speaks to a new opportunity that the city manager and I also discussed yesterday. The downtown bond program that the voters passed in 2010, that ended April 30th this year. It was a 10-year allowance by referendum. We are looking to replenish funds in a code compliance component again, not downtown, but in other villages, following our plan of conservation and development with the city of Norwich. I'm not sure of the value that we would put in the first year, but you'll be hearing about that within the next month. Code compliance, the rent that's a market would support per square foot, and loan availability were the 3 tenets of that bond program that I wrote with Bob Mills that the voters approved back then. We still believe strongly in the code compliance component because those are generally the highest hurdles to get over, particularly with an aging city for the historic buildings we have held onto, which I think is a positive for us. Having those historic buildings here, the main bones of our community, is what we're really known for, whether it's down here or Panema Mills or other sites. The Hale Mill, which is being developed, by the way, into a hotel, that is going forward. That was stalled by the pandemic as well, but they are going forward with their plans. About 46 unit out there.
That's right near on West Town Street area. Are we talking about right near our office, actually? Not too far, a mile or two, right?
The Hale Mill is in Yannick Village, across the street from the Yannick Firehouse.
Yeah.
What was old Route 2, when the bridge connected Franklin down there, that bridge isn't gone anymore. So it's kind of an isolated area, but we're looking to help them do that investment. But getting back to a bond program, we want to replenish funds in the code compliance to assist people with the ADA issues and everything else. We've been looking at downtown, one quick area, shared elevators. The buildings are side by side. If you can get separate property owners to agree to some type of working relationship, you could locate an elevator in maybe someone else's building, but it could service your upper floors in the other buildings. We have to work outside the box. This is one thing that Jason taught us a lot. He even looked at creating ramp structures that could tie in people on Upper Church Street, where you could follow the ramps down to Broadway. And you can actually do that there. That whole corner where the People's Bank used to be, there are 13 buildings that could benefit from 2 shared elevators alone because of their proximity to each other. So we're trying to think outside the box, but be creative, help to energize and repopulate those upper floors. That's really important to us. We need more residents downtown. We do have residents in the Thayer building, in the Warregan. I'm meeting with the the new owner of the Warregan. Bruce Becker sold his interest in that. Mr. McCarthy is now David McCarthy is now the principal owner of the Warregan, former Warregan Hotel. He's actually interested in looking at the Reed and Hughes project, which has stalled because the Women's Institute went out of business. They're now defunct. They own it, but we have engaged with him. Our city historian, Dale Plummer, has assisted this very much. And we're meeting with him, going through the building and sitting down to see. I forget the term, but he's recapitalizing the Warregan, bringing in new investments. He is concerned about investments across the street from his new project. They can drag the value down. He sees the benefit of even investing in other buildings downtown now, for which I thank them immensely to even have that kind of concept. Not many people will do that today. But we're sitting down, going through the building with him to see if we can get that going. That may turn into something like small units. At one time, it was going to be 20 units with half dedicated to veterans. Maybe they end up in 10 short-term rental units now, larger. The short-term rental market is a phenomenon that's hitting this city. We've got about 70 of those. These are individual houses or some of the old mansions that are now being utilized, and we're seeing impacts on neighborhoods. We're also looking at an ordinance to try to address some of those needs to protect the integrity of some of these ordinances. We have an individual who bought a home on Broadway who's now duplicating her illegal zoning activities. She's authorized for a bed and breakfast at 270 Broadway. This is public, so I don't mind talking about it. She's running wedding venues, 200 to 200 people there, and there's nothing in zoning that allows that. She thumbs her nose at us, but she's now bought 2 other properties, and she's doing the same thing in these other neighborhoods, including in Norwich town, which can't accommodate that kind of vehicle traffic and parking. And I mean, it's a problem in the housing industry locally. These are the things that are happening in Norwich right now. But the short-term rental market may be an area for investment. And I want to stress that because I've been promoting short-term rentals in downtown. You rent an apartment in downtown, what's your income for the month? Versus $161 average per night in the short-term rental unit. Because that's what people are getting in our community.
Right.
So there may be other ways to get investors in downtown, overcome these costs of repair and get these properties engaged and let that owner make some money. What's wrong with that?
All right, thank you. I have a bunch of questions. Seems like they're from Bill Chang, and I will read them to you. Bill wants to know, who can we contact now before Jim comes in for NCDC? Who would we contact if we needed to?
Fawn Walker.
Who?
Fawn Walker. She used to run the energy efficiency programs for Norwich Public Utilities. She retired last year. We brought her back on to manage NCDC in Jason's absence.
Okay,
Devin Light is another person down there. Devin is a bright young man, analytical strengths. He's there helping Fawn as well, along with Leanne D'Ambrosia, the staff person, and Mary, and I'm sorry for getting Mary's last name.
if you are able to email me like a general phone number, later I'll pass it on to everyone. And is City Hall open to the public yet?
It opened Monday fully.
Oh,
We still have people to make an appointment because
Okay.
it's just more efficient. There are some changes going on at the city clerk's office. You will find that there's a portal now in one of the main doors that you would normally walk in, and you will, some of the information you need, you will receive right there at the door. If you have an appointment, you go back inside, that's fine. But we're just trying to keep an orderly flow and not inundate them all at once, because they end up waiting anyway that way.
Okay, thank you. And is the mill rate going to stay the same or will it go up?
Well, if I have my say, it'll go down. I did that
No.
in 17. The mill rate was, the general fund mill rate was 40.9 when the mill rate was adopted in the budget of 15. We took, I'll just say what it was. The voters revolted and threw the Democrats out of majority. Republicans had a 5-2 majority, and within 2 years, the mill rate was now almost under 40. It wasn't a major increase, but we didn't allow it to grow. And that meant we saved over $6 million in proposed new spending because we removed it from 2 proposed budgets. You have to be aware of where you live. And you have to be aware that taxpayers should be the first issue you talk about when you're looking at a budget. Services are important. We want police and fire, our human services office. She has done such a remarkable job over the years. And we have to have that here. Some people say close human services and anyone in need will go away. That's not true at all. You just won't have anybody there to assist them. And our focus down there, and Leanne's, has always been to lift people up so they can lift themselves up. It's not handing anything out. And that's really an important thing to emphasize when you're dealing with human services. But the mill rate proposed right now, based on the new revenue estimates that we adopted at the last council meeting, because I put a resolution in and I asked John, and then everyone in the end voted for this resolution. There was some fighting about it because they thought it made him cut 3% of the budget and spending. It didn't. It made him look at other ways to save money. He came back with a little under $400,000 in savings. We adopted that. We adopted new revenue estimates. So there's about $1.4 million available in new revenue that wasn't allocated in his spending plan. Now that could go towards lowering taxes. However, there are demands. The Board of Education received a 2.5% increase from the city manager. They want 3.95%, call it 4%. The interesting thing there is they claim now that they're going to be turning back to the city $1.5 million unspent from last year's budget, which they told us we didn't give them enough in the first place. So there's a whole other debate there. But if they can save $1.5 million from this tough year operating, and a lot of that was due to COVID expenses being covered by the COVID dollars and other expenses not being realized because schools were closed, savings in transportation, things like that. So maybe it's not a true savings of 1.5. There is an opportunity to lower the mill rate. I don't know what Mark and Ella and Darrell and Joe are going to do. They have the majority again. It's 4-3. Bill, Stacy, and I do not and will not support a 4% increase to the Board of Education. They're also getting another $1.2 million money from the state that was not in the governor's budget, but appropriations did not accept his full state budget. Kathy Austin helped rearrange that policy. So the city isn't losing out on what was supposed to have been there, an increase in the education cost sharing formula. Lamont had taken that away. She put it back. So if you know they got a 1.2 million increase from the state, they saved 1.5 million. Why are they demanding 4% increase? None of it makes sense. It doesn't add up. We'll be fighting that on the floor. I'll be fighting to lower the mill rate because I think my goal as a mayor was to keep the mill rate low. In 13, when I was last in office, it was under 28 mills.
Wow.
In 14, they adopted a mill rate over 38 in 1 year. They'll argue it was revaluation. If you argue that, then you have to acknowledge that people's assessed values plummeted. So their equity was lost on what they owned. And then you hit them with a tax increase? That's not good policy.
Yeah, I'm sure the realtors will be happy, homeowners will be happy if that is able to go down. So that's good news for us, and I would like to, yeah,
You know,
I would like to hear about that if that does happen. Lastly, how is the opportunity zone working for Norwich so far?
well, we spent, during that year of 18, we spent 6 weeks. I asked every department to drop every major project. We all worked together on that. NPUs, IT staff, David Poor, worked with Donna Ralston in the assessor's office. And those of us at NCDC, because I serve on their board, Bob Mills was there. We worked very hard. The planner was involved in that. And we submitted an application for 6 zones. We were able to get 3. They also asked us at the time to take the highest priority. We picked Thamesville, downtown, and all of the east side, because that's how HUD defined the east side zone. It runs from one end of Preston to the other within Norwich. We actually have an opportunity zone investor. They're working with Darwin Gebby, God bless his soul, he just passed, and his son Alex and his wife. They have an opportunity zone investor over there at West Ledge Development. It's 120 units of market rate housing. I've been there. It's beautiful. They continue to build more market rate projects here in our city, and I strongly encourage that. Panema is market rate, moderate, low income. It's a mixed use. The nice thing about that, someone who maybe, I hate to clarify people, but someone of lower income can have the same value of an apartment as the person at the higher income. They're all built the same. They're just different sizes. To me, that's how you should deal with low income housing. Have it blended in other projects and other communities. It doesn't stand out by itself. I think that old model of one large unit of 400 units of low income housing was a disaster in that design.
Yeah.
And I won't support those. And I've already turned people away that wanted to do that. There were, when the 49 acres Norwich Hospital site was acquired by Carl Castano. He's the owner, if you want to know who that is. He's a CPA out of East Hartford. He has 11 accountants working for him. Really nice man. He recently was able to sell or lease the superintendent's house. There's a new family in there. I live right behind that. I'm right up the hill from the Norwich State Hospital. Our property overlooks that now. We're on a little dead end and we love it. It's quiet. No more big high traffic roads. I'm rambling. I'm sorry. You wound me. That project, he had a developer come to him. He wanted to cover those 49 acres with low income housing. Now, what happened was Jason Vincent, I'll be going back to him so long as I'm there to thank him, even though he's not with us. He insisted that we designate that land as planned development. Planned development doesn't allow any housing. So that site was protected. The area where we want to build the new business park is designated planned development. He insisted that we do that as well. Because we've had some very bad ideas presented to us. I had a car reclamation company come. They wanted to put a 75-acre car dump on that site. They were going to build a brand new 100,000 square foot reclamation building for parts. They were going to move all the husks around the building. And that was totally visible from the road. That planned development zone doesn't allow that. Again, thank you, Jason Vincent. He had such a vision of the future and the needs of a community. He cannot be replaced. Jim has the tall order.
Yeah, for sure. I like the idea of doing corridors, like above ground corridors to connect things. That's a good idea. Well, this has been very enlightening. Our hour is up. Les, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add, but your contributions were valuable. Thank you. And we miss Angela. Give her a shout out. Thank you for filling in for her. This was a great hour. Thanks to everyone. And we'll let you guys sign off. Mayor Pete, thank you. And Les, you can sign off. And if the commercial practitioners can stick around just for a minute, I just have an announcement to make for you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll be in touch.
Good.
Thank you, Les. Okay, so that was good. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.